Welcome into episode 348 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue down in lovely Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and Scott McLaughlin in even more lovely Lowell, Massachusetts.
That's right. The Cape of the Merrimack Valley, they call it.
Exactly. Bridget and Scott, we got to witness the Bruins' third preseason game of training camp down in New York. We saw the Boston Bruins debut of Nikita Zadorov in a Bruins sweater. Obviously, Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak, Pavel Zacha got their first preseason games as well. So there's a lot to – the Bruins didn't look great in that preseason game, and we're not going to put much stock – we're not going to put any stock into the outcome of preseason games, obviously. And every preseason game itself has a different story. Some preseason games carry more weight because you have high-end prospects that are trying to make a team. Other preseason games, it's just a couple of veterans that are getting some touches. So that's what last night was down in New York. But we still have plenty of takeaways from that game and just, again, training camp throughout so far. So Bridget and Scott, hope you guys are doing well, and let's jump into the opening shifts.
Yeah, so I'll start because this continues to be probably the leading conversation out of the game and preseason in general, besides Lysell, is goaltending. Because once again, you see Brendan Bussi get back in the net and there's some more soft goals, and it just stuck out pretty bad that goaltending was a glaring issue in that game. And like you said, you're not putting stock into the outcome, the loss, but you're looking at those goals and thinking that Brendan Bussi probably could have had a few of those back. So in that way, the score does matter, because those were moments where he could have set himself apart. You know, he's trying to take a job if Jeremy Swayman isn't around for the start of the season and the deal's still not done. So he had an opportunity. I think he missed it so far both times in preseason.
Yeah, I wrote a column for weei.com for Friday morning about how, I don't see how people can just assume that the Bruins will be fine, or like their goaltending will be fine if they don't have Swayman for a month or two. Like I don't buy that at all, and definitely want to get into that more. I think you're seeing concerns in the preseason. But my opening shift is about, Brian mentioned prospects trying to take advantage of opportunities. Mine's about Fabian Lysell, who did not play Thursday night, but we all expect to be back in there Saturday. And I think this is a tremendous opportunity for Fabian Lysell. His two preseason games so far, one not so good, one very good. I feel like which way this third game goes for him is going to go a long way. If he builds on Tuesday night and has another very good game, I think he's putting himself on the inside track to make the team. Obviously, with still another week of camp and probably a couple more preseason games for him to go. But I think he's on the right side of that line if he keeps it up. If he takes a step back and has another quiet game and there's inconsistency, then I think he might fall back on the wrong side of that bubble and have some uphill work to do over the final week. I think the door is open for him. And, if you look at maybe just like one guy that he's battling with in Tyler Johnson, a veteran who's in on a PTO, I think Johnson's been fine so far, but hasn't really done anything that's jumped off the page. I thought he was, this isn't saying a whole lot because I didn't think too many Bruins were good at all Thursday night. I thought he was one of the better forwards, maybe like third or fourth on the list behind, I don't know, like Mark Kastelik, Cole Koepke had another pretty good game, but like there wasn't a lot to be excited about there. He was okay. He wasn't as bad as some other guys, but he's by no means like guaranteeing himself a spot. So I think that is wide open for Fabian Lysell, who is younger, more talented, better legs, better skating. Like, it's wide open for him to take advantage of that chance. And I'm very interested to see Saturday night if he does.
Yeah, Scott, that's a great way to put it. This third game, it really could be the swing for him. 1-1, one not so good, one very good, as you put it. So, yeah, the door's open, and we'll definitely talk more about him. My opening shift has to do with Charlie McAvoy, and we haven't spent a ton of time throughout the summer or certainly training camp talking about some of the top players in the Bruins, just because we know who they are and there's less story there, obviously outside of Swayman. But Charlie McAvoy is coming off of despite scoring a career high in goals last year. Last year he scored 47 points, which is down from 56 and 52 in the 2 previous years. So the question is, why was that? And I think there's many reasons. There's the fact that the Bruins had a more defensive structure last year to overcompensate for maybe a lack of offensive firepower. They kind of protected the house, so to speak, and I think that probably translated to McAvoy's point totals, maybe a guy like Lindholm and others. But overall, McAvoy was still very good. But there's another level he can get to offensively. Certainly another level that he's already reached before. And then can he get past that level? Can Charlie McAvoy become a 60-point player? If the answer is yes, it's going to have to be because A, he's healthy enough to play most of the season, if not all of it. I don't know if McAvoy's had a full slate of games in his career. No, the most games he's ever played is 78, which obviously is almost a full season, but not quite. And so if he's able to stay healthy for almost 82 games, that'll be a helping factor. And then also, can he take that next step on the power play? Can he get an extra 10 to 15 points in the power play this year that he hasn't had a chance to do as QB on PP1? So yesterday in the pregame skate, they worked on the game group worked on the power play. And that power play unit was McAvoy, Zacha, Pasternak, Geekie, and Patra. So not exactly their power play one unit in the regular season, but nonetheless, it was PP1 reps for an ensuing preseason game. And I was there, Scott was there, and the power play wasn't really clicking all too much in zone. And McAvoy showed frustration at the end of the culmination of drills, where he just shot the puck against the wall afterwards by himself, just frustrated with himself. And then against the Rangers, the power play also didn't look very good. So McAvoy is going to get the first chance on power play one this year, quarterbacking it. Jim Montgomery has said as much. But he seems to be battling some confidence still running a power play that's bled over from last season. And with the emergence of Mason Lohrei, I just don't know if McAvoy is going to have the luxury of a long leash this year running the top power play if Lohrei continues to do his thing. And we talked about it before we started recording. McAvoy seems to be he doesn't really know what he wants to be on the top of the power play unit, the top of the umbrella, because there's a guy in Edmonton like Evan Bouchard who just has a really, really hard slap shot that backs off defenders and is a threat to score every time he shoots it. But that takes a while to get that shot off, which means penalty killers can have more time to block it. Then you have guys in the past like Erik Karlsson or John Klingberg who they're just really good at getting pucks through in the power play. And it seems like that's what McAvoy's trying to do. He's just not really executing at a elite level, trying to create scoring chances in the power play. It's kind of one and done, and it's not that much of a scoring threat. So I'm certainly not criticizing McAvoy's game preseason one. I'm just saying going forward throughout the season, it's going to be a storyline to watch. Can he take advantage of his chance in the power play, or will he continue to leave the door open for somebody else like Mason Lohrei to take his spot?
Yeah, the power play in general, I think, is a huge storyline to watch, and he's obviously a big part of it. Let's remember, like, last, 2 months of last season, or even from the All-Star break on, their power play was not good. It slowed way down and struggled a lot. And, like, remember, we were talking about, should Kevin Shattenkirk be QB1 on the top unit instead? Should they just roll the second unit as the top unit? Because there was a stretch there where the second unit was actually outscoring the first unit on the power play. They have to get it fixed. And, like, obviously there's one notable change, which is Elias Lindholm coming in. They're going to put him in the bumper. obviously they haven't been able to practice that yet because Elias Lindholm has only practiced the very first day of camp and now has been out with an injury. Montgomery has said he's expected back by next week, and in time for opening night. But all these missed practice reps are not ideal. They're not ideal on the power play. They're not ideal for his chemistry with Pastrnak and Zacha. And that they didn't like bring in a new power play coach. It's still Jim Montgomery and Chris Kelly in charge of it. So yeah, like something has to change and be better. And I think McAvoy getting a lot better or getting better QB work, even if it's someone else, like that could be the catalyst. And McAvoy says the right things. Like I even saw before the game last night, Nesson during their pregame show aired an interview that Adam Pellerin did with him, and he asked him specifically about the power play, and McAvoy said, I want to shoot more, I want to be more assertive, and it's like that's what you want to hear, but got to actually go out and do it. Like we've heard that before, and then McAvoy sometimes slips back into old habits of maybe hanging on a little too long and things kind of slowing down once it gets to his sticks. So it's gonna be fascinating to watch. Like I still don't think there's any shortage of talent there, but they got to find a way to click better than they did to end last year.
Yeah, and I know part of what Brian was saying was, how long is the leash? Because you can only go so long without scoring on the power play. And of course, when the power play doesn't score, it's not just the guy at the point's fault. It's a combination of all sorts of things, but sometimes changing it up to somebody like Lindholm maybe helps get the offense looking a little bit different from back there. And we know Lindholm can get shots through, and he's somebody that they shouldn't be afraid to go to on the first power play unit. He gets power play time with his second unit already. So that's a guy that you should feel comfortable coming in and taking some of those shifts if he needs to. And then we know that Mason Lohrei got a little bit of a look at it last year as well. Maybe he comes in and takes over a little bit more of a role this year, which, by the way, I think he's going to have an amazing year this year. From what I've seen so far in training camp, he looks better than last year already. He looks more aggressive. He looks more confident. He's not giving anyone any space. Like, this is a kid who, if he has a lot of momentum coming from that defensive side of the game that he's improved on, you already know he's got that offensive skill set. Give him time. See if he can do anything with the power play if you're looking to change things up.
Yeah, I think that the only potential downside of using Lohrei is I know generally a right shot making the pass to Pastrnak is better. That's what he's been used to most of his career. And it doesn't mean it has to be that way, but it is, if you have the puck out in front of you, it's a more natural pass for a righty to make on his forehand than a lefty, would be on his backhand. But there's ways you can figure that out though. Like I think if it got to a point where, hey, Lohrei is just doing a better job than McAvoy, like you can kind of figure the rest out. And Pasternak's so dangerous that he should be able to be a dangerous weapon no matter who's feeding him the puck.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and that reminds me of the distinction of McAvoy being a righty versus a lefty with Lohrei. Reminds me of when McAvoy first started to get PP1 looks. I remember asking Bergeron about this, probably 3 or 4 years. It was 3 years ago, maybe, and it was like the 1 month stretch where Scott gave me access to speak to the players and went. No, I'm just kidding.
Then never let you back.
Then the season ended quickly right after that. But I remember asking Bergeron, because at the time Krug was gone, and they gave a lot of those PP1 looks to Grzelcyk at first, and when McAvoy got that first look, the power play really started to pick up actually. And he was really excelling. He was probably thinking a lot less. He was probably just playing more instinctually. And Bergeron referenced the fact that McAvoy was a right-handed shot, and that just opened up more natural passing options for everybody else on the unit. And yeah, it seems as though he's thinking too much. And like in practice, and I was just saying to Scott, Bridget, when I think you were before you came over, but I don't know if it was Chris Kelly or maybe it was Montgomery, but somebody was right behind the power play practicing yesterday, and like you know when a coach uses their stick to direct a player like where to go with the puck, the coach kept pointing like for McAvoy to go to Pastrnak, almost like immediately, like the drill starts, go right to Pastrnak, and McAvoy would give it to Patra on the other wall where there's like more guys covering him, and he was doing the exact opposite of what the coach was hoping he would go with the puck. And it just seems like, yeah, it makes sense to give the puck to one of the best players in the world and let him kind of, see where the seams are and play pass with him. So I just think he might be overthinking things early on in camp because these guys are still getting their timing back and everything. And I'm sure that's a lot to do with it. But hopefully McAvoy is able to just find his confidence, because if he's playing to his capabilities, I think that it could be an amazing power play unit. But when he's struggling, you start to make bad decisions, you start to put the puck into traffic, or you start to overhandle the puck, and when the penalty killers ice the puck, it takes away 35 seconds from your power play. So that's a killer, right? So high percentage plays is what he should be focusing on.
I want to bring this up too, because this is a conversation we'll be having if Fabian Lysell does make the team. Does he get time on the power play, like second unit, because he kind of plays that Pastrnak spot on the power play. That's how he scored on the power play in his second appearance in the preseason. And once again, he's got that same shot, right hand shot in that same spot that he kind of hangs out as Pasta. So that Fabian Lysell, if he does make the team, could be another asset to add to a power play that's going to have some turnover from last season.
Yeah, and Patra, I think, has mostly played that spot as well, although they've moved him to his strong side elbow on the right a bit too. So, like, yeah, you could definitely see that as, the second unit would be like Lohrei up top, Lysell left elbow, Patra right elbow, and then, figure out the rest, whether it's
Coyle,
Geeky, Coyle, Frederick, Brezzo, whoever's not net front on the top unit, like some rotation of those guys between net front and bumper.
If that's your second power play unit, that's like a full changing of the guard. Like not full, but if it's Lysell, Patra, Lohrei, that's a really young second unit, and I'd just be interested to see it.
Yeah, it is a changing of the guard, and you would hope that they'd probably have somebody like a Charlie Coyle or somebody who's got some beef to him and some NHL experience to hunt down those loose pucks that are ever so important on power plays.
And maybe you trust someone like Lindholm a little bit more at the point than Lohrei, maybe with that unit. But
yeah, I wonder on him. I wonder if they are going to maybe just, if McAvoy and Lohrei are your two defensemen on the two units, I wonder if they just use Lindholm strictly as like a 5-on-5 and penalty kill defenseman. And I know that wouldn't really help his confidence getting back to an offensive game. But let's be honest, with Lindholm, I think he scored like 56 points or something like that in 22-23. And then last year, I think he scored 26 or something along those lines points. It was a major drop off, and people are looking at Lindholm being like, wow, his point production was trimmed in half. But if you look at the average of his points, his season totals throughout his career prior to 2022, 2023, he was like a 30-point defenseman, 25 to 30-point defenseman. So I don't know if last year was even much of a down year for him offensively. It just was compared to the year prior.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I think I even said that times last year, which is like, in a weird way, it almost worked against him that he had such a good offensive season the year before, because now that became the expectation. And so when you end up with like, it would have been bad if he had even regressed to 35, 40 points, because then that's still a 15, 20 point drop. But he dropped like 30 points, like cut it in half, even more. So it's kind of just like a perfect storm of fuel for negativity, that it wasn't just, a little bit coming back to the average. It was a complete fall off.
But Brian's right though. Like if you look back at his time in Anaheim, like 22-point season, 23-point season, 28-point season, 31, 20, like those, that's much more what he's been in his career.
Yeah. I want to, so I asked Montgomery about this last week, because I want to see them put Lindholm in some more offensive situations and not bury him with like as many defensive zone starts. And, so I asked Montgomery, like, will there be any conscious effort to get him in more offensive situations? And Montgomery basically said, like, it probably won't really be a conscious effort. He thinks it'll happen naturally. He wants all the defensemen more involved. But he basically said, like, Lindholm's a team player and he's happy with whatever role he's in, and we'll use him however we best see fit. But I especially with Zadorov now in the mix, like I do think it would behoove them to, give Lindholm some more offensive starts, load up Zadorov with some more defensive zone starts, and just try to get Lindholm some offensive confidence going. Yes, he needs to do that himself, but I also think there are going to be situations where they can help that process along.
Do you guys want to talk about Zadorov real quick after, his first preseason game? Because he's
a boss. He had a bad play. Oh my God, it's a terrible contract. They should just buy him out.
Yeah, he makes one bad play. He can't find the puck, gets behind him, breakaway goal. That wasn't a good look, but I don't think that the panic should be as high as it was with some people. It's just a preseason game. Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, look, it was a bad play. Like,
yeah,
he pretty clearly did not have the angle and wasn't able to adjust in time. And I've said it before, you're going to have to live with some of this. Like, he takes chances and he makes mistakes. It's been part of his game his whole career. I think the positives outweigh that. But it's going to happen from time to time. And yeah, some of the freak out online, like I had multiple people just tweet at me 6 years, $5 million a year. And I'm like, yeah, that is in fact the contract they gave him. Like, so we're
in case you didn't know.
Yeah. Like, so we're supposed to conclude it's a disaster because of one play. Like, I know he took a penalty too, kind of a soft call on it was a cross check by definition, but it's also one that guys get away with 10 times a game. He had a good hit. He brought some physicality. Like, I think he's going to be fine. We're going to need more than one game before we start. Obviously, like it's a terrible contract. He stinks is like too far, but like there is going to be an interesting conversation about, is he a good fit with McAvoy? Like, is that a good top pairing, or do you want to try something else at some point? But we're not doing that after one preseason game.
Yeah, no. And with Zadorov in particular, his NHL attribute isn't his quickness. Now he can cover space with his size and and the length of his strides. So he's still able to get from point A to point B in a similar fashion of a smaller player who's quicker, because that smaller player needs to be quicker to cover the space that he can just do naturally with his size. But when that's who you are as a player, you're gonna need some reps to get going. Like his if he seemed slow last night, it's probably the slowest he'll seem all year, because that's just, for a player of his makeup, it's gonna take those games for him to get going, to get his timing, to get his confidence. I don't know if there's a level of like everybody's kind of taken. I don't know if there's like an unwritten rule where players go a little bit easy in the preseason because you don't want to. Like, I don't think Jacob Trouba is going to try to take a run at David Pastrnak last night. I think there's kind of like an unwritten rule, like, maybe save it for the regular season, unless you're Nick Robertson and you're trying to, hurt your own teammate in William Nylander. But so I just think that a lot of those elements combined made Zadorov maybe seem a little bit underwhelming last night, but it's just not indicative of what I believe people will see throughout the course of the season.
That Nick Robertson, William Nylander highlight is unbelievable. If people haven't seen it, I encourage you to go find it. I retweeted
it.
Yeah. But it's like, oh my God, like just such like a classic Leafs thing. And I hope I didn't see if there's any update. Like I hope Nylander's okay because like he did take a knee to the head. So
yeah, that was an awkward play and in preseason, and it's like one of your best players. It's a tough look and a tough situation for them. But what I was gonna say was, I think that Montgomery should give McAvoy and Zadorov once the season starts. We're not talking about preseason. Once the season starts, I think he should give them a good slate of games together before he tries to move it around. And obviously, we talked about the options that he has. He can move Zadorov pretty much to any pair. He can rotate Lohrei up with McAvoy. He could put Lindholm there. He has a lot of options, but I want to see an extended look at Zadorov and McAvoy just to try to see what they're like with a little bit more of that built-in chemistry, because when they were practicing at training camp, they looked pretty good. They looked like a pair that you basically Zadorov could help McAvoy spring up ice and transition. And I think that it could be a good combination if they give it enough time.
Yeah, for sure. I am interested to see if Montgomery mixes the pairs up at all at any point before the regular season, or if he just rides this right into the regular season, because so far in camp, it's been Zadorov, McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, Lohrei, Peak in every practice since day one. We're now, a week plus in, and there's been no shuffling at all for those 6 at least. So obviously that tells you that is what Montgomery plans to start the season with, but I'm interested in, do you mix it up just to kind of get everyone, a practice or half a practice with someone else, knowing full well that you might change them up at some point in season.
Scott, before we go to your opening shift and talk about Lysell and Tyler Johnson, I kind of want to switch gears a little bit to Bridget's, which was about the goaltending, and talk a little bit more about your article that you put out this morning. And, you talk about people online saying that the Zadorov contract is a bust after one preseason game is a little bit much. I also saw it as it pertained to Linus Ullmark stopping 23 of 24 shots for the Senators in a preseason game, and everybody being like, "Oh my God, why?" Like, no, I think that a lot of that's like
win a cup this year.
That's because of the ongoing frustration about Swayman not being here. I get that, but anyway, so as it pertains to the goaltending, last year, Brandon Bussi had this amazing highlight reel save in a preseason game against the Rangers, and so everybody was like, well, he's probably pretty good down the line. I think what we're finding out is that there's a lot of weight now on Jonas Korpisalo, because the notion of, well, the Bruins just have the structure. They have goalie Bob. Bruins goalies are always good. As it pertains to this current crop of goalies, DiPietro, Bussi, nobody's really shown much of anything other than Jonas Korpisalo and his 7 shots faced in one preseason game. So I think there is a little bit of, to your point, Scott, in the article, tread lightly, because the Bruins might be running the risk of they might be playing with fire a little bit, more so than we thought. And look, some people email us, have tweeted at us that, like, yeah, the skate pod crew, we're in the pocket of Jeremy Swayman, his agent. Like, we've all met any of them or give a shit about Swayman's contract. We're not doing Jeremy Swayman's bidding. I've said all along, I think the Bruins have the leverage, because if Swayman doesn't sign by December 1st, he's not playing. He's a UFA for another year. Like, I think if I'm Swayman, I think the Bruins can bluff longer than Swayman in this camp. But to your article, Scott, it might be some rough waters for a little bit if they don't get something figured out before December 1st.
Yeah, I've made this point before, but like, you can't just assume you're going to be a playoff team because you have been for, 8 years or whatever it is. Like, starting off well is important. And the Bruins play 11 games in October. 8 of them are against teams that were in the playoffs last year. This is not, remember last season, like they were playing like some of the worst teams in the league out of the gate. They had that West Coast trip where it's like, cool, go beat up on the Sharks and Ducks and like teams that everyone
they played
knows.
Chicago
sucks.
game 1.
Yeah, Chicago game 1, like completely rebuilding. Yeah, like this year is not like that. Like they have a tough start. And sure, if they start slow, there's time to overcome it, but you don't want to have to do that. You don't want to have to play catch up. It's hard to do in a league that has the 3-point system, where it seems like everyone gets a point like every night. So yeah, and so I looked this up last year. So Evolving Hockey has a stat called standing points above replacement. Essentially, like what WAR would be in baseball, except they use standing points because I think that helps kind of understand it from like the hockey fans' perspective. Last year, the Swayman-Ullmark tandem was worth 17 standing points above replacement. So if the Bruins had replacement level goaltending last year, if you believe in this formula and how it's calculated, if they had 17 fewer points, they would have made the playoffs by 1 point. So there would have been no margin for error. They would have been fighting down to the last day of the season. If you don't have Swayman in net and you already traded away Ullmark, replacement level goaltending may very well be what you have. Korpisalo last year was below replacement level. Ottawa was a bad situation, but when you take all that into account, Korpisalo gave up more goals than expected. So he hurt the Senators, in addition to them probably hurting him. I think he'll be better here, but, one of like the best goalies in the league better? No. Maybe he's league average. But your team, this roster is built from the back up. Their strength has to be defense and goaltending. And, you hear so much, well, the Bruins have the defensive structure in front of the goalie, so they can shield whoever they put in there. It's like, well, are we sure? Like, are we absolutely certain that they can do that? Because last year the Bruins ranked dead last among playoff teams in high danger chances allowed. They did give up high danger chances last year, a lot of them. I think you've gotten better on defense bringing in Zadorov. I think Laura can take a step forward. I think putting in a top center like Elias Lindholm helps your team defense. All true. But it might take a little bit of time to get that all set. It might take time for Zadorov to get used to the system and figure out where he fits best. Lindholm, we've already said, has missed now a week plus of camp. He's missing important reps to get ready. Like, you would really like to just have that security blanket at the back where you're like, okay, even if it takes us time to figure everything else out against tough opponents, we have one of the best goalies in the league behind us and we'll be okay. Whereas if you don't have that, now you're worried about your goaltending in addition to getting everything in line in front of them. And I think I think you'd be playing with fire a little bit. I'm not saying, they're going to start 0-10 and miss the playoffs, but like, I think you risk putting yourself behind the 8 ball a bit.
Yeah, well, what you're saying basically equates to you lose 8 more games than you did with Swayman and Ullmark, or something to that effect. If you go with Korpisalo, or could even be more losses than that, because like you said, he was under that average. But I want to think back to this conversation that we had with Razor right after the Ullmark trade, which was about Korpisalo's contract and taking him on, and how the Bruins didn't want Swayman's backup to be Brennan Bussi. They wanted somebody who had NHL experience. They wanted to bring in a veteran type goaltender that you could feel more comfortable in as a backup than Brennan Bussi. And now we're seeing exactly why they wanted to go that route, because you watch the performances Brendan Bussi has had this preseason, and I don't think that if say Swayman does sign, Bussi was the backup, Swayman gets hurt, that's a really tough situation you'd be in. I think Korpisalo, bringing him in was definitely the better option than staying pat. Obviously, we think that part of the reason Korpisalo came in was Ottawa dumping him, and it wasn't necessarily the Bruins going out and saying, "Oh, we want him, like we want a goalie." It was part of the deal to get that first round pick along with him for Ullmark. So I don't know if you guys have thoughts on what the team would have looked like in this situation that they're in now if they hadn't gotten Korpisalo, if they just were going to roll with Brendan Bussi.
Yeah, Bridget, it's a great point. I think, look, I just think that, and I'll put my hand up and be guilty in this situation, but I think when you have a team that's always had good goaltending, certainly in the last 2 decades, you can trace it all the way back to Razor in 2004, 20 years ago. And before him, you had Byron Defoe, you had some others. Like, the Bruins have always had good goaltending. And so Bussi and DiPietro, I think they've had pretty good numbers down in the minors. So you kind of chalk it up to, like, yeah, they can do the job if they have to for a little bit. And also, Vegas wins a Stanley Cup with, like, their 4th goaltender on the depth chart. Like, you just start to feel like maybe you don't have to have the top guys, and you can make do if you have the roster in front of them. But to your point, Bridget, like what we've seen out of Bussi in preseason, he's handling the puck very poor, not very decisive, and
a lot of rebounds.
A lot of rebounds. And, like, I don't want to damn the player for a couple of preseason games, but definitely, like, hasn't shown much. So whether it was Korpisalo or another NHL veteran like him, which is what Razor pretty much said, he was like, look, the Bruins were going to go out and get a guy regardless. Maybe Korpisalo cost them an extra $1 million as opposed to doing it in a separate deal or free agency or whatever. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that the Bruins were right, whether it was Korpisalo or somebody else, getting this NHL guy, because at least they have right now. I feel like we're all saying at least they have Korpisalo right now, and to your prompt, Bridget, we wouldn't be saying that if they just went with the minor leaguers.
Which, by the way, we feel better about Korpisalo because he looked good against 7 shots in half
right.
Like
right.
He might. I think he's probably going to play the whole game Saturday. If I had to guess how they're going to plan this out, like if he goes up and gives up 4 goals on 25 shots, then we're back at square one, where it's like, God damn, I guess we don't even feel good about him. So like that can still swing the other way too. And
yeah, because right now we're playing like the don't overreact side of it, but I think that we will also be in the the panic mode if that's what happens Saturday.
Right.
So
yeah, and like with Korpisalo, it's like, all right, so even if you're gonna go without Swayman for some prolonged stretch, okay, well, you're still gonna need a second goalie, and as we've said, Bussi and DiPietro have not given you a whole lot of any reason to feel comfortable about that. So then your other Korpisalo, as like a workhorse number 1 for however long it takes. Well, that's not ideal, because the one season in his career he's been used as a workhorse was last year, and it was his worst season. Like when he's been at his best in the NHL, it's been in more of a platoon situation. So you wouldn't even want to do that for any prolonged period of time. Again, like I still think, it's probably not the end of the world if Swayman misses a couple games, if it, lingers a week into the regular season. But this idea that like they can wait till December 1st, I don't know. I think it's a mistake to assume that they're going to be okay for like 2 months.
Yeah, so it looks like the Bruins have 25 games from prior to the December 1st deadline. So 25 games without Swayman. Yeah, it's too much of the schedule to play can you go 500 game? Can you go 600 game? Because that's a big chunk. It's not like we're talking 10 games here where it's like, can you go 6-4 without him? It's a big stretch. And I would say just two quick things quickly. Number one, to wrap up the Swayman thing, Scott, you do say it's like the Bruins are playing with fire, playing 25 games without Swayman potentially. But don't you think he's playing with fire more because if he doesn't sign by December 1st, he's out for the year? Like, I feel like he's playing with fire more than the Bruins, because the Bruins can be like, well, we'll go 600 without you. We can still. I know it's not optimal. I'm just saying, like, it's not a good situation for anybody. But Swayman's talking about not playing at all. The Bruins are talking about not playing with the guy that they want.
Well, right. And by the way, he would still be a restricted free agent next year. So they'd be going through all of this again. Bruins would still have the option of taking him to arbitration. Like, it would be a mess. Like, you can't do that. So, which, by the way, does bring me to the other thing I wanted to bring up here, which is, I don't know if you guys heard, Spit and Chicklets respond early this week. They responded to Don Sweeney's comments. They got into it. Ryan Whitney stood by what he said, but what I found interesting was he also said, Ryan Whitney, that is, that he thinks 8 years and 8 to 8.2 million a year would get it done. And this is from someone who, by his own admission, is very pro player. He was open about the fact that he's not a fan of Don Sweeney. So,
no.
like, he is coming from one direction, and that is the player's side. And he's saying he thinks 8 or 8.2 gets it done. To which I would say, if Don Sweeney has not put 8 years, 8 million a year on the table, that needs to happen like yesterday. Like, that should be what's on the table.
Should have happened in August.
You forced Swayman and his agent to turn that down. And at the very least, I think Don Sweeney needs to get ahead of the PR game, because I think he's fallen behind. I think I've been someone who has put blame on both sides, but I think most of the fan base puts the blame on Sweeney. He's losing the PR battle. You make that offer, you leak it out to whoever you want to leak it out to, and the ball's now in the court of Swayman and his agent, Louis Gross. That is a reasonable, fair deal. If they want to be the ones who reject it and drag this on even longer, like, fine, shift the pressure to them.
Yeah. And Scott, like, I asked you maybe about a week ago on this podcast if the Bruins could have done anything in the past to have, in hindsight, to have gotten ahead of this situation. And you said, yeah, they could have not gone for it all in 2022, 2023. But a detail that I read in a Fluto article afterwards, and it's been talked about since, is that last year when the Bruins went to arbitration with Swayman, they could have signed him for 2 years instead of the 1. So that is something that Sweeney could have done. But he probably wanted to give the Swayman camp give them something like, hey, look, just play well this year and then we'll figure it out. And if the 8x8 is figuring it out, then Sweeney, like, you need to kind of make good on your word.
And Keith's report was that they're not willing to go over 8. So, like, what if it's
don't go over 8, offer it. Like, put 8 on the table. Yeah, but Brian, like, I took that as like a clear olive branch to Swayman of like, hey, we could lock you in at 2 years, 3.4 million a year. Now that there are some other considerations, because it would affect like RFA status, and if you take the 2 years, you then can't take him to arbitration. So there are some other considerations, but I did also think it was an olive branch of like, we're not going to trap you into that deal. Like, we're going to do the 1 year and let's keep talking and figure something out. And so when people say like, Sweeney hasn't given anything, or the Bruins have only played hardball, like, that's not actually, there have been chances for them to play hardball that they've backed away from. That would have been even more hardball. They didn't do it. Taking him to arbitration this year would have been hardball. They didn't do it. So, I'm sure Sweeney didn't expect it to drag on this long and be this difficult, but there have been chances where the Bruins could have made it more difficult, and they didn't.
Bridget has a few minutes, so let's just quickly go over the final topic, which is the door that's open for Fabian Lysell going forward. If he continues to play the way he did in the first game, in combination with maybe a Tyler Johnson or somebody else not really, making the team out of a PTO or whatever. So Brad Marchand was asked about encouraging signs from Lysell and Merkulov after their game against Washington, and Marchand made the sentiment was basically it's encouraging, but it's going to take a lot more if they want to make the Boston Bruins. And you listed many examples. So Bridget and Scott, did you want to get into that briefly?
Yeah. So those comments, it was kind of a long answer too. Because he touched on a lot of things, not just that guys like Lysell and Merkulov have to continue to step it up, but also that one of the parts that was a little bit missed maybe in the reporting or what fans heard was that he said he wants them to make the team. He said he wants Lysell to make a push and the team to have some young legs and be able to bring that talent in, because it's important for an organization to keep bringing in guys like that and them panning out at the NHL level. So I think that you could tell by his tone, though, that and when he said, the part that stood out to me was when he said it's going to take more than a few good plays. Like I don't even think he was willing to go as far as to say that it was a good game. I think he just thought there was a few good plays. Like that is very much like a slap. Like, hey, that's it. Like that's the only thing we're giving you credit for. You got to have to do a lot more.
Yeah, I didn't take it so much as a slap, so much as it's like it's a statement of fact. And he said, like,
absolutely.
You can't be happy after one preseason game. Like that's exactly it. It's like, okay, Fabian Lysell had a really good game Tuesday. Georgi Merkulov had a pretty good game too. Like that's not good enough. Both of them are going to play probably at least probably three more preseason games. Like you got to have a second, third, fourth good game. You got to have good practices in between. If you think like, all right, I had a great game at the Garden, I'm feeling pretty good. Like that's not going to get you on the team. You still have a lot more work to do. And by the way, worth mentioning here, Lysell was on a line with Charlie Coyle and Brad Marchand in practice on Thursday. What day is today? Yeah. So Thursday, the non-game group does basically a full practice before the morning skate for the game group. And Marchand was out of his no contact jersey, so he was practicing in full for the first time. And the line was him, Coyle, and Lysell. So, we'll see if that. I think Lysell is going to play Saturday. I wouldn't be surprised if Charlie Coyle plays because he has not gone into a preseason game yet. So maybe those two are together. I feel like Marchand might not quite be ready for game action yet. Maybe sometime next week. But Lysell should get a shot. I think on a line with Coyle maybe. And as I said at the top, like it's a great opportunity for him. The chance for him to really sort of push his way into that job is there. It's wide open for the taking.
I do wonder how much the message gets to Lysell, like because we've heard Montgomery's comments, and then we've heard Lysell say that was never like specifically said to him. Like Marchand says it publicly. Is he also saying it to him when they're out there practicing together? Like, hey, you got to do more, or is it more?
I think he is. Yeah,
He's the kind of person, and that
if other guys might have trouble communicating at times, I don't think Brad Marchand's one.
No, it also makes me think like maybe this is another situation like as the first year when Montgomery was here, kind of letting Bergeron do some of the talking and some of the dirty work and the motivational stuff. He's kind of leaving that to Marchand, I think, in this specific situation with Lysell.
Yeah, and Marchand is, again, to Scott's point earlier, he wasn't saying anything that wasn't just facts. Like, it can all be true at the same time. It's encouraging. They played well. But if you want to make the team and surpass players that are on one-way contracts, NHL caliber players, you got to take somebody's job. And you're not doing that based off of a couple of good plays and a good game. You got to do it off of consistency, which is why the first week of training camp, I was like, I don't think he's going to make the team, because you have to have an impressive camp that's bookended from start to finish. Now, maybe he plays so well going forward that we'll all just forget about the first couple of days, and that's fine. But Marchand is just sending the message about, hey, the National Hockey League is no place for complacency. Once you're there, let alone making it, right? So I just think it was just him sending an honest message. I don't think he was being critical. He was just being honest, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I thought what it came across to me like is he was speaking from experience. Like, he was giving good advice. Like, basically in when Marchand was coming up, he knew he had to beat someone for their job, and that's not easy to do because people work really hard when they're worried they're going to lose their job. So like, you have that internal competition. You really have to play with an edge the way that Marchand has played his entire career. So I felt like the message was like, you have to think about this differently. Like, it's not just about you showing off your skill. It's about you being more cutthroat in your approach to, not giving up any space and making sure that you grab something and you hold on to it.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning because Scott mentioned that they were on a line in practice, and there are a lot of elements to the game that Fabian Lysell is going to have to improve at, and improve at with consistency, that Coyle and Marchand and other NHL guys do regularly, which is winning one-on-one battles, being sound defensively, just the keeping up with the mental pace of the game. But one area that he certainly was not out of place in was the skating. And I know that's obvious, but like, he was in these battle drills with Marchand and Coyle, and like, his skating, even with some of the top players in the Bruins, is like, it's right there with them, if not like, even more impressive. Like, Marchand's very quick and shifty, and Marchand's edge work is amazing. He can do things on a dime. Lysell's stride is he has more of a powerful stride, and you're gonna see it when he's going. So yeah, those are the little details that if he wants to make the team, he has to kind of show those in camp. Not a finished product, but he has to show that. And so again, like the next couple of weeks here before October 8th, we'll find out.
Yeah, and with Lysell, and I know we gotta just wrap up here. Like, Marchand has also talked about how much, hey, we value defense. Like, anyone who plays with us has to be responsible defensively. And it's like, true, but there's also a real upside to having someone in that line that can push the pace of that line and help drive offense. Because there were times last year where that line was a little quiet offensively. And it was like, okay, they're not getting scored on, but they're also not making a ton happen at times. And it's like, yeah, if you have someone who can, hey, he's going to transition into the offensive zone and get us set up. He's going to push the pace. He's going to create a scoring chance. Like, there is a real upside to that different element that, maybe that line doesn't have to just be defensive shutdown line. Now you have a second line that can score more. So, yeah, that's my final thought there.
All right. Well, Bridget, enjoy the rest of your weekend down the Cape. Scott, you as well, and Lowell, and all of our listeners have a wonderful weekend, and enjoy Bruins preseason hockey, and we'll talk to you again on Monday. Hey, guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.